Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome to this week's astrological report for August 19 through August 25 of 2025. I hope everybody's doing well. So it looks like this week we have a lot of changes ahead. It's the beginning of a lot of changes, I should say. Currently, we have the moon here at the middle of Cancer, and we'll be waning through the rest of Cancer this next 24 hours, crossing over Jupiter and Venus. And then by tomorrow on Wednesday, August 20, the moon will ingress Leo for a change of circumstances and mood and entering the dark moon phase for the next couple days until Friday. And Friday we have the sun ingressing Virgo for a change of focus and a change of season, followed up by the moon ingressing Virgo, reaching the sun, and then we have a Virgo new moon. So we're entering a brand new lunar cycle that shows we're coming into completely fresh new dynamics for the next month, new circumstances, and again, a new focus from that point forward. Now, this is also the beginning of a lot of changes. Just because it's a new moon cycle in Virgo, which requires to be flexible and adaptable to changes in itself, but also because of the aspects that this new moon is making that I'll be talking about. But also, it's the beginning of eclipse season. This is pre-eclipse vibes that we're starting now. And 2 weeks from this new moon, we're going to have our first eclipse in Pisces, a lunar eclipse. And then 2 weeks after that, we're going to have a solar eclipse at the very last degree of Virgo. So we're actually going to have 2 cycles connected to Virgo, one in the very beginning at 0 degrees and one at the very end at 29. And it's all wrapped around the South Node. So we're coming into a very karmic and fateful time for the rest of August and September, which means there's going to be long-term effects based on what plays out here. And there's going to be a lot of changes that come along with all this over this next month. But it's also wild card season, so there's a little bit of an unpredictability about it. And because of the certain aspects that this new moon is making, there is going to be some instability that we have to deal with, some surprises that come out. And I'll talk about the potential of what type of surprises and changes that this could be talking about and who's most affected by it. Also, we have Mercury now building up momentum. So it's going to be actually leaving its retrograde shadow roughly by Sunday into next week and then entering new territory. And Mercury's in charge of this next cycle that's coming up. So a lot of the Mercury retrograde of what we were processing is also going to start moving forward in new ways in how we're looking at our thoughts, news, information that has come out, changes that we have to adapt to, and then we're going to start to get very practical and work with this in a new way of how to move life forward with this new kind of thought, this new information that we've received potentially. And there could still be more surprises around news and information as well that also contributes to changes coming up. So that's one big thing right there. And again, this new moon is going to be aspecting basically all of the outer planets that you see here in this minor grand trine on the screen. So this is this worldly point. This is talking about, again, I've talked about it so many times, but it's basically this new order that's shaping up for the world. New rules, new systems, new structures, new laws, and just a lot of big changes overall for the entire world that's being built and structured right now. And so this new moon is going to really have to adapt this new cycle that we're working with of how to put things in order and all of that. Talking about on this worldly level of what's happening. But at the same time, because this is eclipse season that we're coming into, there's also a sense that we're going to have to prepare ourselves for a lot of changes that are also outside of our control. And there's going to be things that just happen that we have to be flexible and adaptable to. Otherwise, it's going to be a lot more of a challenge if you're fixed and stubborn and holding on tight. There's going to be a lot of things that require letting go and releasing, things that just come out of the blue that we're going to have to deal with potentially. And it'll be for some people more than others, depending on how this aligns with your birth chart. But just in general, just expect that not everything is within our control during this time. There's higher forces, there's a higher power connected to what's developing for people. But then we also have to look at what is within our control and work on those things as well and be proactive and make things happen and get very analytical and practical with life, starting to move forward in new ways. So it's a combination, and that's kind of what Virgo season is about already. And these mutable signs, it's about kind of going back and forth between things, and again, having to really adjust and be flexible to a lot of changes overall. All right, so that's a big part of what we have coming up here. And then it also looks like today the sun is making a perfect trine aspect to Chiron. I believe that's on a world level. There's positive things developing from that with world leaders and issues of war. I think that's been playing out, but that can also be on an individual level of how people feel about themselves. There can be more confidence with this. That's just a couple days before it moves along. And then we also have Venus making some aspects here. Venus is reaching the end of Cancer and will be building up a square with Chiron for the rest of this week. And then it looks like by next Monday, on August 25, Venus is going to ingress Leo for a change of dynamics around people's preferences, relationships, money, financial matters, and just how people go about doing love and general relationship. So those things are going to start to change. And then next week, as Venus is in Leo, it's going to start making aspects to all of the outer planets as well. So really big changes and moving forward in this new era vibe that's building up for the world, around relationships. So it can be on personal levels, depending on if this aligns with your chart, but it's also on the global level, new dynamics between nations that will be moving forward by next week. So that's basically looks like what we have going on here. So just looking at the chart, we do have planets scattered all around the zodiac, except for Sagittarius, Capricorn, and Scorpio here. But this week, the moon is going to be waning through Cancer and Leo and waxing through Virgo and Libra. And currently, we still have Mars out in front of everything in the sign of Libra, which can be either positive or negative for relationships, depending on, again, your personal chart and how Libra aspects you. But it can really stir up a lot about relationships with Mars going through here. Mars and Mercury are still in a sextile. They've been in a sextile for this past week. Mercury will start to build up momentum and start to separate from that. But for the most of this week, they're still connected, which also brings important communications and really stirs up the mind and thoughts and fiery, passionate communication in some cases. But again, Mars in Libra is still trying to play nice and be more diplomatic and compromising with people. But again, relationships are really going to show the biggest changes by next week with this Venus changing, and Venus rules Mars. So right now there's a lot of sensitivity in the air right now, especially for the next 24 hours as the moon is in Cancer with Venus and Jupiter. But things are going to get a little more passionate and dramatic for the rest of the week until we get to this Virgo cycle, which gets a lot more grounded and practical. However, even this Virgo cycle is ruled by Mercury, which is still in Leo. So there's still a little bit of a dramatic flair that comes along with this whole cycle. And one thing that we do have to look forward to is once Mercury gets to Virgo, that's going to be later in September. As we come into September, basically, it'll have to square Uranus. But once it gets past that square with Uranus, a lot can start to improve with Mercury being in its home sign. And this cycle coming up, it's going to be about a lot of different stuff. And it all also depends on your birth chart, where you have Virgo in your chart. But generally speaking, there's a lot about health that this cycle is connected to. There's a lot about work. And this is a cycle where we're going to have to put in a lot more work as things want to start moving forward and require action. All right, so with all that said, check out the description as usual. I have everything written out for you with timestamps for the week ahead. There's a link if you want to buy a personalized report from me. And let's get started day by day going through this chart here. All right, so starting today on Tuesday, August 19, we have the moon in the middle of Cancer, approaching Jupiter and Venus. So there's a lot of sensitivity going on here. The moon is in its home sign, so it doesn't really go anywhere else right now. And so with 3 planets in Cancer, including Jupiter, the biggest planet, of course, again, there's a lot of sensitivity, a lot of feelings and emotions, and this is all about home, your inner world, that kind of where the best energy is at. But also that depends on if your chart is in harmony with Cancer or not. So this is most beneficial for people that have a lot of water planets in their chart and earth planets. If your chart is full of fire and air, then Cancer doesn't really align with you all that much. It might not be your best time of the year. It all depends on your personal planets in your birth chart. But in general, again, this is kind of big needs. This can be big nurturing for self or others. It can be big desires that are building up this next 24 hours as the moon will be approaching Venus and crossing over Jupiter. So it could also just show, emotions are a little bit over amplified for good or bad. But again, it can also be people that are a little bit hypersensitive. People could be a little more guarded and protective as we're going through this next 24 hours. There could be big indulgences for some people. It's more of in a private inward way. This can be great for real estate deals this next 24 hours. The moon is losing its light. Again, it's preparing to enter the dark moon phase by tomorrow. So a lot of the real estate stuff may have already been playing out over this past couple weeks, but there's still potential for more good vibes here about home, family, property, real estate type of stuff, that this moon is going through. Earlier today, in the wee hours of the morning, the moon was squaring Mars, but that's separated pretty nicely by this point that you're watching this video. And for the rest of the day, there's pretty much just easier aspects going on here as the day goes on. So first thing in the morning, there could still be a little bit of that tension in the background from Moon and Mars. But as the day goes on, it should start to separate, and then Moon, Jupiter should be big feelings, big moods, but also a little more private and inward. And then again, we have this sun. Like I said, the sun is at 26 degrees, trine Chiron at 26 degrees. So if you have a personal planet at 26 Aries, 26 Leo, 26 Sagittarius, then there's a grand trine to you for 26 Sag. And then the other air signs, Libra, Aquarius, Gemini, 26 degrees, roughly give or take a few degrees around that. Then this is in a good alignment with you and your personal chart. But generally, with the Leo, the sun is very strong here in Leo. And connecting to Aries, the sun likes Aries as well. So where people are going through this sensitive transit of Chiron, again, if you have a personal planet at 26 roughly of Aries, then you're already going through this sensitivity from Chiron for the next year. And maybe today, as the sun aligns with that in this positive connection, it can help people feel more confident about themselves or shine a light on something more positive of how they've been feeling about things that have been more sensitive or vulnerable. All right, so that's one main aspect all day today. And then the next aspect later on today, like I said, will be the moon reaching Jupiter. And that's going to be pretty much later this evening. Late afternoon. It'll be evening for some people. And again, so later today, will be the most abundant as time goes on. Unfortunately, the market will be closed by the time that the moon reaches Jupiter, but it could affect the market for tomorrow in more of a positive way. I believe earnings are taking place this week, so earning season can be a little more volatile as well, up and down, but perhaps this could be a little more positive for tomorrow, because tomorrow the moon will reach Venus. But even tonight, just generally here, for what you're doing, in your own space, your own comfort zone, again, there might be big emotions, there might be big needs, a big appetite, so to speak, for something here by tonight. And with the moon in between Venus and Jupiter, again, there could be a need for indulgences here. So just kind of be aware of that. Try to take it easy. Don't go overboard with anything. or do if you want. It still seems like an overall pretty good vibe in your Cancer area of life where you have this going on. And then the moon is connected to the nodes of fate for Tuesday night. The moon is trine the north node of destiny and sextile this Virgo side. So there can be a sense of something showing you your future. There could be a feeling, something intuitive that opens up for you that just kind of shows you where you're headed. But it's kind of a fateful dynamic, whether we recognize it or not. And again, it's going to be more relevant for some people than others, depending on your chart. But just know that circumstances are aligned with fate and destiny by Tuesday night for whatever is happening. It could have a long-term effect on the future. So that's all we have for Tuesday until we get to Wednesday on August 20th. Again, we start things off with the moon conjunct Venus. Now, this is actually going to be first thing in the morning here when they're exactly conjunct, which is pretty good. It does start off pretty much the day for everybody. So it's like 5 to 6 a.m. here on the West Coast. And later in the morning if you're on the East Coast, and then perhaps afternoon if you're in Europe. And then if you're in Australia, you're 17 hours ahead of me. So you got to do the math for that. That's like the next day pretty much. But this is starting the day off pretty sweet with the moon conjunct Venus. Again, it could be still a little bit indulgent for people. People might want to be in their comfort zone, doing what they want to do first thing in the morning on Wednesday. The moon still is in this position that doesn't go anywhere else. So it's still in your comfort place. And emotions and feelings, it's a little more sweet too, a little more nurturing. This could be like wanting to cook breakfast for somebody or wanting someone to cook breakfast for you or take care of you. It just has that sweet kind of motherly, nurturing vibe to it first thing on Wednesday morning. But that's not going to last. The energetics and the mood is going to really start to change as the day goes on here. And the moon, right after that sweet conjunction, it squares Chiron. And it can still bring up some emotional sensitivity, about the self, relationships, family stuff. So it starts off sweet, but there's still something in the background that people could be picking up on. I still think that the sun is close enough to be, making this positive, shining a positive light on that area as well. But I think people's feelings are just a little bit overly sensitive perhaps on Wednesday morning before the day changes. And that will be the next thing that changes is the moon ingressing Leo. But this is actually going to be later on by Wednesday evening and Wednesday night. So most of the day, actually, the moon is in Cancer. Again, very sensitive for most of the day. But then as the moon enters Leo, it's in its dark moon phase now. And again, this is where the moon for the next couple of days is going to be closing out this current Leo cycle that we've been working with. But now we have 3 positions here in Leo. So it can still be a lot more dramatic and now passionate by Wednesday night. The mood really starts to change. However, we see that the moon, as it ingresses Leo, it makes this trine to Saturn, which has backed up to 0 degrees of Aries at this point again. So again, this is talking about the world point and world government developments that's been happening. And so by Wednesday night, there can start to be a change for world developments to the next level, and then for the rest of the week until we get to that Virgo new moon cycle. So I think important worldly stuff is going to be happening for the rest of this week and beyond, but probably, again, this week, most likely. And then for everybody, as the moon comes in here into Leo, now we have a lot of fire going on. Now we're in the fire in the air. Of course, we still have Jupiter at the middle of Cancer, which is still big emotions and big feelings, and Venus is still there. Relationship desires and preferences are still more in a sensitive, nurturing position or private position. That will start to change by next week, like I said. But now, from this point forward, there's a lot more fire and air, a lot more passion, a lot more instincts, a lot more communication that's going to be building up, a lot more outward, basically, energy, more social, but it is still the dark moon. The moon is losing its light as it's coming through here. So it's also about closing things out at the same time and preparing for the new. But as the moon aligns with Saturn on Wednesday night, the moon is actually forming a minor grand trine. So now there's 2 minor grand trines going on. The moon trine Saturn and Neptune and sextile Uranus. And then, of course, Neptune and Uranus and Saturn are still sextile. So again, there's these rare alignments in the sky that show major world developments are happening. On a personal level, people might just feel more comfortable with what is changing in their own personal lives or how they're looking at the future. With the moon coming in here for the next couple of days, people's emotions and feelings are more outward, more expressive and creative as well. There's like a combination. Some people might want to have more fun and be more outward and social, but because it's the dark moon and light is closing out, some people will still have this inward vibe as well, depending on your chart and how this all aligns with you. So kind of a combination of both, but there can also be a sense of maturity, emotional maturity here with the moon trine Saturn, and then with the moon trine Neptune as well by Wednesday night, and sextile Uranus, being more open to looking at things differently with new ideas, expressing people's moods and feelings are being expressed in unique, surprising ways, perhaps. And then being more creative, imaginative on Wednesday night. But at the same time, the moon also, for the final aspect, will be opposing this Pluto. And again, next week, Venus will have to oppose Pluto, and then we'll be done with this Leo opposite Pluto dynamic that we've been dealing with this Leo cycle. So it's like closing out that Pluto vibe as well, in a sense, with the circumstances and the mood and the feelings, but things get intense still. With the Pluto opposite, there can still be really intense, powerful emotions and feelings being expressed, and circumstances could still be a little bit intense and powerful, but the thing is we have an outlet. So there's most likely not going to be as a difficult dynamic with this, because the moon does have all these different outlets to express itself and relieve this pressure, this tension, this excitement that could be in the air on Wednesday night. So perhaps the trine to Saturn and Neptune could maintain some emotional stability while there's a sense of intensity or transformation that's happening on Wednesday night in some places around the world. So just know there's a really big mood change for people, compared to the rest of the day. And now with the moon in Leo, it's being ruled by the sun, which is still very strong, and the sun is reaching the last couple degrees of Leo, which is typically a very positive spot of the zodiac. Although it's beginning this sense of an ending as well from this point forward. Again, closing out things of the past. So Mars and Mercury are still sextile, and the moon is going to be building up and moving through that sextile to kind of close it out. So there's still a lot of strong, passionate communication. The mind is still very stimulated. People can be sharp, but yet with Mars and Libra, it's like people are trying to be a little more diplomatic and graceful about how they're going about the communication, but it can still be pretty passionate now that the moon is here as well, and the opposite the Pluto. So again, Wednesday night seems pretty dynamic overall, and it's really showing us, it's given us a feeling of the future of this big minor grand trine in the sky for everybody about the world and how it's changing. Of course, not everybody's comfortable. It all depends on your birth chart. How does Leo align with your chart? If you have planets at the very beginning of Taurus, or the beginning of Aquarius, or the beginning of Scorpio, then this is a little more tense for you, a little more challenging for your comfort level, perhaps. But it's still giving us a sense of the future as we're coming into this dynamic and what we need to prepare for as we get close to this new cycle. So that's Wednesday. Then we get to the following day on Thursday, August 21st. And there's just 2 major aspects here for Thursday. And one is the moon reaching the sextile with Mars and the conjunction with Mercury. So again, it activates kind of this last bit of the Mercury-Mars sextile that's been in place. And that's going to be pretty much midday and kind of setting the tone for the rest of the day. So again, the moon is in its dark moon phase, so in some cases there's still an inward vibe, preparing for the new, kind of more private, but it's Leo too. It wants to, the moon in Leo wants to have fun, it wants to self-express. People want to do this when the moon is in Leo, I should say. And with the moon conjunct Mercury and sextile Mars, it's going to really bring out this emotional need for communication and self-expression and creativity or general action. So it could be a social day, it could be an active day. It's just a matter of how much will that play out, because it's the dark moon phase, which is typically more of a behind the scenes phase. But in Leo, that could be taking place in your own private area. You could still be super amped up and expressive and creative in your own home environment or in your own space, your work environment. It may not be like as much out and about in this big way. In some cases, it still could be. It's also connecting to relationships. So I think strong relationship dynamics are, a part of this as well, especially through communication. But then that could also be the beginning of this Venus building up the square to Chiron, which will show some sensitivity within relationship that generally people have to get through. But it's still a very passionate day on Thursday overall. Now, some people can be sharp. I think with Mars in Libra, it's still trying to maintain some diplomacy and grace in this process. But because Venus rules the Mars, there could be something that comes out or is being said here around Thursday, and then that leads to, something that was said that has some relationship sensitivity as a result. So be a little more cautious. Generally relationships are still in a very sensitive place here, an emotional place. And so these vibes aren't necessarily what Venus is comfortable with. It can be a little too sharp for the preference of people, of what they want within social or relationship dynamics right now. So just pay attention to that, but other people might be more instinctive too in what they're doing and saying. But it most likely will still be a strong day for, people publishing, putting things out there, networking, phone calls, emails, just a lot of mercurial activity overall will most likely be the theme of the day on Thursday. So it could be a good day to get stuff done too. Again, preparing for the new, like taking care of things that need to be resolved before we come into this new cycle, things of the past that are still lingering. Could be a good time to be working on that. Mercury, it's getting ready to leave its retrograde shadow, not just yet, but it's approaching the last degrees of where it's already been. So there is a sense of Mercury has already moved through here a few times, and this is the final time before we enter new territory by next week. So again, just a good day to be very active and busy. And let's see, those are the only two aspects. So then we move forward for Friday, August 22nd, and this is where first half of the day is different from the second half of the day. First half of the day, we're still in this Leo vibe, beginning to close out the past. This is still deep in the dark moon phase. The sun is at the last degree of Leo. So there's a sense of urgency. Things can be a little more critical. But again, this is typically a very positive part of the zodiac at 29 Leo. But we still have a lot of drama here, perhaps. And this is where Venus is now making this square to building up this square to Chiron. So we have a lot of conjunctions going on here, but this basically leads to the new moon. Now, the new moon isn't going to be until late on Friday, and that's going to really play out in the early morning hours of Saturday. For some people, the new moon will be on Saturday, but for people on the West Coast here, it's going to be late on Friday night. So for most of the day, we're closing out the last lunar cycle of Leo before we enter this new dynamic. And the first aspect is the moon in conjunct to the north node of destiny. So we have to make, this is like the beginning of a lot of adjustments that we're going to be making to changes from this point forward. So things are shaping up. We could have distractions. That's going to be more and more as we go through this cycle. A lot of distractions and things that make it difficult for us to maintain our focus. And, narrowing the focus is what we're going to be needing to do. But this is like big dramatic vibes for most of Friday. And it could also talk about world leaders. Things are about to change on this world level dynamic that's been playing out all week long as well. Of course, this is Trump's ascendant, 29 degrees of Leo. So the sun is right on Trump's ascendant, and then the new moon is conjunct Trump's ascendant. So this is a brand new cycle for the dynamics that Trump will be playing out over this next eclipse cycle as well. So he's got a lot of focus on him. There's a lot of major stuff going on, most likely, on this world dynamic probably. All right, so again, adjusting to the future, adjusting to being pulled from behind the scenes, and distractions are possible. And then the sun will leave this Leo and enter Virgo for a big change of season and a change of focus as the day goes on for the second half of the day. So this is the 2 o'clock hour on the West Coast. So it's the evening and night for other people around the world that the sun changes signs. So now, as the sun comes into Virgo, now the sun is being ruled by Mercury. And the moon is still at the last degrees of Leo for most of the night here, in its darkest phase before the new moon. But Mercury's at 12 degrees now, and its retrograde shadow point was 15.5 degrees. So again, it's getting ready to move past its shadow, but it's not quite there just yet. So as the sun changes signs, now there's a new transit in your birth chart. So check to see where you have Virgo. Of course, you already have the transit south node that's moving through there. It's at almost the middle of Virgo at this point, but now there's a focus on the beginning of Virgo, wherever you have that in your chart. It's a certain area of your life. So if you're new here, know that you don't necessarily have to have planets in Virgo. You still have an area of your life that's all about Virgo. And whatever area of life that is, it's called a house. That's where the new focus is for this next cycle. So generally, now the focus wants to get more practical, more analytical, more down to earth, and put things in proper order, make improvements. So Virgo is also the season of health. A lot of major health issues for people have been playing out, and this is going to be a cycle that something changes for people about health that will affect the long-term future. Now, things have already been playing out for a lot of people in that way, but this is a cycle that's going to create more changes about whatever that is. And of course, not everybody's dealing with health, but this, for the people that are, this is a major cycle for improvements and changes around health dynamics. But it's only the very beginning. Again, eclipses are going to be a part of that. There's still all of September of what plays out that's going to affect people's health for the future. And again, when Mercury reaches Virgo, that's going to be a great improvement for a lot of people's health. But Mercury still has half of Leo to get through before it reaches Virgo, but just know that when Mercury reaches Virgo, that's going to be a strong improvement around health dynamics, generally speaking. So if anybody's dealing with a major health issue, hang in there, continue to do what you got to do, and just know that things will be changing in September compared to what you've already been going through. But generally, it's also about work. This is now the season of work. This is an earth sign. And actually, this is our first earth energy coming in now, which can be helpful because, again, we've had a lot of fire and air and water, emotions and passion and instincts and intellectual energy. And now this is the first earth, which is about getting more grounded, getting more practical, the beginning stages of wanting to get more organized with certain dynamics. And it really comes back again to this Mercury retrograde that we've been going through, and whatever we've been processing, whatever came out during the Mercury retrograde that has changed something for us. So perhaps for some people, maybe they got news that they were losing their job or something is changing in their life. And now it's time to look at the future and how we're going to work with that new dynamic and how to get more organized and plan for the future. But things are going to start to be a little more chaotic. There's going to be more instability from this point forward. And there can still be a level of drama that's going to start to play out because it leads back to Leo. But the sun is going to start making a lot of inconjunctions, which are aspects of irritation and adjustment to big changes that are trying to take place. So that's going to be a big change of focus now, wherever you have Virgo. And again, trying to narrow the focus and get more practical with what you're focused on and what you're doing. Part of the problem with this is that this cycle is going to be difficult to maintain our focus because there's so many other things happening. There can be a lot of distractions, surprises that kind of pull us away from narrowing that focus completely. So again, this is now where we have to start to be a lot more flexible and adaptable to a lot of different dynamics and changes that will be building up. All right, so that's the change of season with the sun. And let's see. Then we have the moon making that final trine to Chiron that the sun made as we're going through Friday afternoon, Friday evening, depending. So that can be, again, a good sense of how we're feeling about the self, and yet relationships are entering a very sensitive point here. So there can be, on one level, a positive feeling for our individuality and what we need to do for the self, but then there can be sensitivity about how that affects other people, our personal relationships. So just know that there could be a lot more sensitivity within your general relationship dynamics as you get to the end of the week here, and something is getting ready to change. This is going to lead to a change basically by next week with Venus changing signs, but it's kind of rooted, I think, in whatever's taking place here around Friday and into the weekend. So just know people might be extra sensitive in relationship. They might not be acting normal or something. They could be more guarded or protective of themselves. There could be vulnerabilities that are coming up in certain relationships, that could affect how people are acting within certain relationships. And I would say it's more affecting the feminine, generally speaking, in the relationship. So that's a big part of Friday night, is that Venus square Chiron. And then the moon reaches the last bit of Leo for most of Friday night. Can still be a sense of something critical, something ending and preparing to change. So overall, I think Friday night could be a bit critical, of whatever's happening. And whatever is happening, again, it's leading to a change that will have an effect on the future. And then the moon does ingress Virgo and reaches the sun right off the bat here by late Friday night. So again, for some people, this is early Saturday morning that this new moon is taking place. But for people on the West Coast, it's Friday night, super late. And it's the beginning of this change and the beginning of this new Virgo cycle. And this new moon comes in strong here right as the moon enters Virgo for this new cycle. And this is it. This is the new moon. And there's a lot of different aspects here that the moon is making. So first of all, this new moon in Virgo is at 0 degrees. So do you have any personal planets or points at 0 degrees of Virgo? So say your ascendant is 0 degrees of Virgo. Well, this is your new moon for the next 12 months. This is on you for yourself and what's going to be playing out for the self in big ways that are changing. But you can also look at it, again, if you have a personal planet here, whatever that planet is in your chart, there's a new beginning for what that planet does in your chart, depending on what houses it rules and what it is generally. So, this is where you need to know a little bit of astrology for yourself to know more detail about this for you personally. But generally, again, this is the beginning of this really earthly practical cycle, and yet this isn't going to be the most practical out of all of them. And that's because this is eclipse season. This is the very beginning of eclipse season now, which is wild card season that has a lot of unpredictability and changes that are going to take place. not necessarily instantly, but throughout this next month, and because it's at 0 degrees, 0 degrees is critical, and it's a sense of something very new and different, something very fresh. And at the same time, we have all of these outer planets in the very beginning degrees as well, which has been talking about the world changing in a very new way that we're not even fully seeing all the way yet. It's still this process for the next year. Before next year, we're really have developed it by that point. But this new moon is now connecting to all of these outer planets in a difficult way. It's the in conjunction. The moon and the sun now have to go through an in conjunction with Pluto, Saturn, Neptune, and a square to Uranus. That's going to be the biggest aspect from this new moon, is this square to Uranus. So that means that this entire cycle is going to be working with this mutable square and adding Uranus to the mix, which we've never seen in our lifetime in this position. Again, it shows that this cycle is going to be a bit chaotic and unpredictable, and it's going to lead to some instability. And this is where I was talking about this cycle shows that not everything is in our control. There's a higher power that's connected to what's taking place, that's shaping people's future, whether they like it or not. So in some cases, this can be a cycle that really shakes people out of their comfort zone, of their patterns and habits. It can bring news and information out that was surprising for people, where then we have to work with that and we have to get organized with this new vibe that's building up from this point forward. That's a little more dynamic and changeable. So it has a level of excitement with it as well. This can be a very exciting cycle where there's a sense of something ready to change. Now, for other people, it can really bring on a lot of anxiety and restlessness and nervousness. So you also have to prepare yourself, especially if you have planets connected to this. So people that are most affected by this current cycle are people that have planets in the first few degrees of the mutable signs. So Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces, and Gemini. Now, it can also affect other people that have early degrees in any sign as well, because the early degrees are going through the biggest stuff right now for changes. But this is a mutable cycle. So again, it's about, we're in between, basically. We're in between seasons. It's technically a new astrological season, but we're in between, of course, in the northern hemisphere, summer versus fall. So there can be a sense within this cycle that we're kind of being pulled in the old energy a little bit of what we've already been going through, and the new that starts to come in more and more. So again, being flexible and adaptable to a lot of changes and surprises, and just the lack of stability that this cycle is showing. But again, there's a higher order to this than just our own, what's in our control. So even though it can seem like it's chaotic throughout this cycle and a lot of changes and even a little bit of craziness from our perspective, there's a higher order that has a plan for what's happening. So this is where, again, there's a combination of, okay, this is where you start have to look at your life and where you need to put in the work now. Generally, it's wherever you have Virgo, but it could also affect other areas of your life. And it's about putting things in their proper order, starting to try to make improvements for the future, putting in a lot of work. But again, some things are going to be outside of our control that we just have to go with. This is also going to be a cycle that's about the South Node. So this is a cycle that requires a lot of purging and purifying and reorganizing for the future. It's also a cycle to try to start to put your life into a plan now that you've seen a lot come out, through the summer here. And if you're in the northern hemisphere, the winter in the southern hemisphere, whatever's been coming out for you the last few months, you have a better idea of what's going on here with this new era that's coming in. And again, a lot of this comes back to the Mercury retrograde that we went through this last few weeks, where information came out or new things came out for us to process and deal with. And now it's like, okay, let's look at all that and let's try to make a plan. Let's try to prepare for the future in ways that we can, and then release and surrender where it's outside of our control. And then we can try to have a plan the best we can, but you also need to know that it's wild card season, and things are going to happen to change your plans too. So again, it's like being pulled in different ways where we have to work with what we can do, but we also can't be too stubborn and realize that there could still be changes that we have to adjust to. So I think now, as we start to build this new cycle ruled by Mercury, it can still be a pretty dramatic cycle overall. Plus, it has that square to Uranus, like I said, which can be excitable and changeable, and a lot of instability and a lot of volatility going on here. Now this is just generally when I say this, so it's not going to affect everybody this way, but generally speaking, there could be surprise news and information that comes out over the next month. Some of that news could be about siblings. There could be something that's surprising that happens with siblings, or siblings could contact you or something with some sort of surprising news. Animals, small pets, Virgo does roll small pets and animals. So there could be surprises that take place with pets and animals, generally speaking. Of course, it's not going to be every single person that has a pet. Again, you'll have to look at how this new moon is aligned with your personal planets. If you have a lot of squares or oppositions or hard aspects, then yeah, you might be affected more. If this is more in harmony with your chart, then it may not be bad surprises or changes or even affect you at all. It all depends on your chart. So I can only generally speak here, but still there could be surprises, again, with news and information around pets, around general health stuff. That's beginning to change, like I said. Siblings, like I said, with surprises. There could be surprises around neighbors with this Uranus and Gemini. Something that could happen around neighborhood or neighbor that brings up some drama or change in some way. And then it could just be, again, more about a nervousness for some people, anxiety for some people that requires changes to your everyday routines and patterns. And overall, this is a cycle that does want to work on how you take care of yourself on the daily basis. What needs to change for how you live your life? So in some cases, it's just about your daily routine. Do you have any bad patterns or habits that's making life difficult? Are you willing to look at those things honestly and begin to change how you're living? For other people, it may be diet. Virgo is usually a sign that deals with allergies and needs a special diet, that's unique to the self. That's not just a trendy thing, but something that fits you personally for your own life that you have to figure out for yourself around food and diet that can affect health. But again, because it's next to the South Node for this cycle, there's a lot about letting go of things that are unhealthy, that are not working anymore for your life, releasing, purging, purifying, getting rid of things literally, perhaps in some cases, and things like that. So it's about how to make improvements that are very different from what you've done in the past with this square to Uranus. At the same time, though, again, there's a lot of inconjunctions. So this new moon is also in conjunct to Pluto, which requires a lot of adjustment in your life, in your daily life and how you live between that and your friends and your group and your community. So there could be, the power dynamics within your community or your friendships that are, affecting your everyday life as well that you have to adjust to. And then there's a need to adjust with this quincunx, in conjunction to Saturn and Neptune, which is on this new point of the self, this need to be working on the self. How do you live your life around freedom and independence and this new way of living, new rules, new systems, new structures for the self that affect your health and your everyday life, work and routine, so there's a lot of adjustments here that's showing about this new era that's building up for the future that we're starting to see more and more of this last couple of months. And also it's about work in general, how you work. This is a cycle that you're going to start to see generally a lot of changes in your work environment, your work, your colleagues, just your work environment in itself could start to show changes. Some of those changes will be surprising that were coming out of the blue that you're not in control of, and then there can be things that you are in control of, of changing the way you work in some way for the better, making improvements. Do you need to let go of a certain amount of work to have something better for your life? That can be the case for some people. This can also have a connection to children in some cases, because it does come back to Mercury in Leo. This could be a cycle of what needs to change around how you're raising children, how your everyday life is around children, and the routines and patterns and habits of you and children and your life in that way. Again, how to get more practical and grounded and organized with a new process of living, basically. This cycle can show a lot of changes within media, surprises and changes within media corporations in some big way. Corporate media could be changing. There could even be changes in social media platforms of new rules or something that happens within this next month. Also, this is a cycle that unfortunately I feel will have a lot of accidents, traveling accidents, especially on the mundane level. It's not going to affect every person, but generally there's going to be a lot more surprises in transportation and traveling, most likely, including this Pluto. This Pluto in Aquarius has a big part of all the mishaps and all the stuff that's been going on with traveling. And because this new moon is quincunx it and square Uranus and Gemini, I think it's going to show a lot more dynamics with those types of events. So we also see a finger of God here that's pointing right to this new moon. And a finger of God is there's a higher power. We can look at it as God giving us the finger, or we can look at it as, a higher power, God, that's shaping the future here that's outside of our control. It's just very fateful and karmic cycle that we're coming into that will affect our long-term future, that we have to adjust to things, again, that are outside of our control. Some of those things, though, are connected to politics with Aquarius. This is a cycle that's also going to have a lot of new, exciting technology that could perhaps be coming out in big ways. I said politics, I think. So social dynamics with the group and the community, we're going to have to adjust to. That's taking us away, that, a lot of distractions. Again, I feel like this cycle is going to be a little more challenging to focus because of all these other influences that we're picking up on. This is usually a Virgo cycle is about getting down to the details and narrowing that focus. But because of all these rare aspects, we're being pulled outside of that focus and having to adjust to it. And again, it's just the season that we're starting that's more powerful than a normal Virgo cycle. But there is a sense of a lot of brand new things that will be coming out because of the 0 degrees. And then at the same time, by the time we get to the end of this cycle, the last week of September with the solar eclipse, there's still going to be a lot of endings that come about from all this new stuff. So it's both endings and new beginnings all wrapped up over this next month. And powerful things that happen that have an effect on the future with this. So that's what I'm seeing, of how I'm looking at this new moon overall. So it's a lot about health. Like I said, for a lot of people, this is a time now that you have more knowledge, more wisdom, more understanding about where you stand with health. Now you have to start living your life in a different way. For the people that, that's wrapped up into health stuff. All right, so there's still some pressure with the quincunx to Saturn and Pluto. There's some intensity, some pressure, some seriousness that this is going to be showing. I think as we come into Virgo season now and the end of August and even more so in September, things get really heavy and there's a lot more pressure, that starts to show with the changes for the future. All right, so that's generally how I'm looking at it. And again, check your chart. Do you have anything in Virgo? And if you don't, then you still have an area of life that this whole next cycle is about. All right, so moving forward, the moon is now waxing forward from this new beginning. this isn't so much the cycle to be overly planning. Like setting your intentions. It's a combination, like I said, overall. Just be very open for things to not go the way you planned. So you have to prepare yourself for that, to be open to changes, basically, that you weren't planning on. But now if you're planning on them, you can just be more open, and maybe you won't be as affected by it, by any kind of surprises that do come in. All right, and then again, this new moon is taking place over the early morning hours of Saturday. That's really changing the vibe, the mood, the overall dynamics for when we wake up on Saturday morning. The moon is waxing forward and all this new stuff. It's going to still be new vibes for the next couple days as the moon is going through here. But the first aspect, like I said, for Saturday morning on August 23 is that moon squaring Uranus. So even the overnight hours of Friday into Saturday morning could show some volatility right off the bat in some places around the world that are surprising, shocking news, things like that. And that'll be followed up, later by the sun. And then it looks like on Saturday, there's really just hard aspects here. So Saturday feels like it's a kind of a tough day for people. Saturday into Sunday. Because then the moon is in conjunct to Neptune and Saturn and Pluto, the finger of God. It's a very powerful dynamic, like I said, all through Saturday. And then the sun also reaches the in conjunction with Saturn on Saturday as well. Which again has a little bit of that having to adjust to responsibilities, pressure, serious things that we're generally dealing with. So basically 3 in conjunctions and a square all day for Saturday. But really, all this is taking place first thing in the morning. It's going to affect most of the day because even the sun is still building up the square to Uranus, which will be the following day technically on Sunday. So really the moon is approaching that south node, which again is a very karmic spot. It's about purging, purifying things of the past, dealing with things. And again, it's this beginning of eclipse wildcard season overall. It's pre-eclipse vibes. And eclipses, events and energy of the eclipses can still play out before the actual eclipse. So consider this overall eclipse vibes from this point forward. All right, so that's that. And Saturday is just kind of, again, a volatile day, perhaps, and into Sunday, because here we are on Sunday, August 24, and the sun is exactly square Uranus for the first aspect on Sunday early morning hours. So Friday night into Saturday early morning all the way to Sunday morning just feels a little bit chaotic and restless and changeable and surprising in some cases. Now, again, not every single person is going to experience some surprise or change because this chart is talking about the whole entire world, and it does affect people differently based on your own personal transit. So I can only generally speak here, but this is what this chart is talking about, is a lot of volatility going on here. For Sunday morning, first thing. It's also, there's a sense of trying to liberate with this cycle as well, even through the weekend here, a sense of liberation and revolution, but it's not easy. It's not smooth. Virgo doesn't want to get all crazy and revolutionary. Virgo wants to be practical and down to earth, but it's this Uranus factor here that's very new that we've never seen before. That's really stirring up a lot that's coming at us from outside of the self generally. Some people could be a little more revolutionary in how they're acting and stuff, but I think it's just more about life itself. The earth itself could also be going through a little bit of volatility and changes, surprises. Just expect it. Expect the unexpected, and if it doesn't happen for you personally, then great. Then it must not align too much with your chart and you can maintain more stability than the general population. So the sun is also in conjunct to Neptune. We're having to adjust to blind spots. We're having to adjust to a new vision. There's also a dissolving away of things of the past versus the dreams of the future. Some uncertainty we might have to adjust to based on changes that are taking place through the weekend. Again, I think on the mundane level, you're going to really see a lot of what this is talking about. For individuals, it depends on how it aligns with your chart. And then there is one easy aspect in between all this on Sunday, and that's the moon connecting to this Jupiter right before it reaches the nodes of fate. So this is still really early in the morning though, so a lot of people won't even be up at this time. It'll be first thing in the morning for people on the East Coast and then in Europe. People on the West Coast, it's still in the 4 o'clock hour, so pretty early, 3 to 4. But there is this moment of connecting to feeling more emotional stability or abundance or big mood or home and family versus work, or just a better feeling of nurturing and feelings there, more generous for a moment, but that's just a few hours and it's mixed in with all this other stuff happening. I'm not trying to say this has to necessarily be awful or just terrible for everybody. It's just changeable, basically. We're coming into new dynamics. We have to be willing to change into these new feelings and situations and circumstances and not be too stubborn or stuck. If you're willing to change, if you're adaptable and flexible, then this can be, in some cases, exciting and a good thing for people as well. It all depends. But it's still kind of, overall, it's a heavier time that we're going to be coming into. And then the next aspect will be the moon reaching that south node. So again, it's a very fateful day. This whole cycle is, but even here on Sunday, things of the past, things that need to be purged and purified and released, surrendering to, dealing with both the moon and the sun here and all these hard aspects. There can also be a sense of criticalness in the air. So be a little more careful of self-criticism, and then also how you put that out into the world. If you're overly critical to others, but also the self. Go easy on the self. This is a cycle that wants to make improvements, but at the same time, the North Node is pointing towards Pisces. And we don't have to be perfect in this phase. That's not the goal. The goal is to change dynamics so that we are more open to entering new territory. We also have to go with the flow in some cases here. So just try not to be overly critical and have everything perfect and just right and all that kind of vibe. It's not going to work as well within this cycle of a normal Virgo cycle. All right, so very fateful karmic time here for Sunday. Just consider it all weekend though. And then the sun is in conjunct to Pluto exactly. So the sun comes into that finger of God as well. So there's like this continuation of this overall finger of God all weekend long. And because it's connected to a new cycle, it's really more about this whole next month that this finger of God is talking about. But we're really picking up on it. Our focus is, again, there can be a lot of distractions from the groups, the friends, the community, that stuff we have to change, our responsibilities, our commitments. It's all kind of coming in here all through the weekend. Now, all this is happening first thing in the morning on Sunday. And then for the rest of the day, it's kind of just, setting the tone for all that. And the moon is past the south node and getting to the end of Virgo. The moon has to make an in conjunction to Chiron first thing on Monday. Now this is late Sunday into Monday, which is August 25. This is where Mercury now gets past its retrograde shadow and enters new territory. So as the moon goes all the way through Virgo and about to change signs for Monday, we really have a sense that we have come into something very new compared to this last month. And we've seen a lot of the changes already, because these are early degrees and all these aspects happen right off the bat for this new moon, it feels like a lot of this stuff comes in quickly and early through the weekend. And then again, the way we're looking at things, looking at the news, the information, our thoughts, our ideas that have changed from this Mercury retrograde, we have a better sense of where we're at and what we need to do now. And we start moving forward in new ways with all that. So at first thing in the morning, the overnight hours of Sunday into Monday morning, the moon making that in conjunction, we have to adjust to our wounds, our sensitivities, our insecurities about the self that's been highlighted in different ways this week, and adjust to that of how we're going to move forward. And then the moon is sextile Venus. Venus has now reached the last degree of Cancer. So by the time we get to Monday, there's a big change, like I said, about relationship, preferences, and financial things that are going to start moving forward into new territory and new vibes. But at first, the moon is connecting to Venus right at the last degree here. A sense of an ending for relationship dynamics before they change later on Monday here. But there is a moment here, first thing in the morning on Monday, where circumstances, the mood, it is connecting to Venus in a good way. We could feel like there's something available for us, but then it just changes. Both Venus and the moon change as the day goes on into a whole new vibe. So we're connected to relationship, or we're connected to a financial thing that's about to change, generally speaking. And then it does change as Venus, first the moon changes signs into Libra. And as the moon comes into Libra, now it's ruled by this Venus at this sense of an ending and a new beginning as the day goes on later on for Monday. And things really start to change. Now that the moon is in Libra for the next 2.5 days, it is next to Mars. It is going to be applying towards Mars. That'll be the following day. But it's in the same sign as Mars now. So passion is going to get stirred up. Relationship activity is going to get stirred up. And like I said, on the world level, the global level here, I believe this is nation states that have come to some new arrangement by next week, and things are going to start moving forward in new ways with the nation relationships going on here that have been already activated and trying to change. And then generally for people, on individual levels, this puts more emotions and feelings into relationship dynamics of, again, trying to be more intellectual about things, trying to be a little more diplomatic and graceful and charming as the moon goes through here, but that's still going to add a little more challenge since Mars is here. Mars is like trying to play nice still, and it's not at its best. It can't be Mars at its best. And also the moon is going to be connecting to all the outer planets again. So we're talking about this new era, and this new era is now in a way connected to these relationships in our lives that are changing. Now not everybody, of course, and there might just be one relationship or something for some people, but overall you have to know that preferences are now starting to change the way relationships are going to be played out. And again, most of this change is about the feminine, Venus. So that's how the feminine is going to be engaging in relationship. But look at this on this chart for Monday, as the day goes on, late morning, and Venus ingresses Leo now, and the moon is in Libra. There's a kite. This is the kite that Mars went through that I talked about in previous reports. And now the moon is going through there. So it's connected to, again, this dynamic that shows all these outer planets are connected to the circumstances by next Monday. So on personal relationships, again, how are your personal relationships evolving? What's new? How are things going to be playing out between you and someone for the future in a new way? There's a new era in multiple ways, and now it's really connected to relationship. And as Venus comes into Leo, Venus is behind everything, but at this point now Venus is being ruled by the sun in Virgo. So there's still a component of relationships that want to make improvements, get more organized. Relationships want to have a connection to the future and a plan in some way. But you still have to maintain a certain amount of flexibility and things that are outside of your control. But at the same time, Venus starts to connect to Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto for the first couple days of next week, Monday into Tuesday. At first, though, it's this good connection to Saturn. At the same time, the moon is opposing Saturn. So there's a culmination, there's a turning point around relationship. But the moon and Venus are kind of making this change together, which is beneficial overall. And the circumstances are now ruled by this Venus for the next 2.5 days in Leo. So this changes, like I said, the preferences on how people are going to want to do relationship and love. So it gets more bold. Now with Venus and Leo, Leo now gets the love, the beauty, and the attention in even a better way than when the sun was going through there. Because wherever Venus goes is where the pleasure goes, where the attraction goes. It's been with Cancer. Now Leo gets its turn to get the beauty, the love, the attention, and the other fire signs. So now, see, with Venus in Cancer for the past few weeks, it's been given the love to the earth and the water signs. But if you have a lot of fire and air in your chart, then this hasn't been the best time for you, But now, for the next few weeks with Venus and Leo, the fire and the air signs get more of the love, but even more so Leo. So now at first, there's still going to be some intensity because Venus is building up the opposition to Pluto. And this is the last planet that has to go through this opposition in the short term. All these other planets already went through the opposition. So now relationships and financial stuff are at this transformative turning point. But generally, people want more attention and love and relationship. Whereas before it was more nurturing, more sensitive, more guarded, more inward. Now people want to be more outward, have more fun in relationship, be more self-expressive in relationship, yet still have a component of practicality that goes along with it because of the Virgo cycle. And I don't think it's over. I don't think it's a youthful Venus and Leo, this particular one, because of the Virgo component and because of the trine to Saturn. That adds a little more of a seriousness, a little more of a maturity to this Venus and Leo. So again, I think that this Venus and Leo wants to look at the long term, wants something more serious, wants to work on relationship in some way, but still get attention, still have fun and be creative and enjoying. There's more of a need for recreational good times with this once we get past these big dynamics later in the week. And Venus is just moving through there. And again, because Mercury's moving forward into new territory, we're looking at things differently. We're moving into new territory in multiple ways, including the way we're thinking, the news, the information that has come out. We're just seeing things very differently at this point, and it's affecting relationships and money. So financial stuff wants to start moving forward as well in your life. If this aligns with your personal chart, again, if you have, Venus will be aligned with you if you have planets at the very beginning of the fire and the air signs. But it's a fast transit, so it doesn't last very long. But Venus trine Saturn, there's more of this needing to work on something for the future and the self. And then Venus will be building up the trine to Neptune, a new vision, a new dream, for some people, fantasy about the future and relationship or love in new ways. So just know that the feminine needs a lot more attention now than it did in this other cycle phase. But there's still going to be some intensity, some power struggles as these dynamics begin to shift within relationships. So it can be on a personal level, and then on the global level, it's going to be between nations, like I said, that are working something out. That also comes with a little bit of undercurrents and a power struggle. And then also this gets mixed in with friendships and group and community stuff. So also look at romantic relationship versus friendship and how those are mixing right now as we come into this new dynamic by next week. But then next week, Venus will be sextile Uranus and connecting to all the outer planets of the new era, and relationship will be willing to enter new territory and do things differently from the past. and be more excited as well. So there can be new excitement that comes in next week around love, relationship, money, and new ways. But at first, as the moon is going through here on Monday morning, there's still a sense of heaviness and seriousness going on as the moon is opposite Saturn. But then the moon, like I said, trines Pluto and Uranus in this grand trine / kite. And there's an opening here to work with the feelings, the emotions, the circumstances in new ways. So it's more social now, a lot more social now, with the moon in Libra connected to Pluto and Aquarius, and then Venus in Leo. So yeah, there's a lot of something new and different here. And the last aspect on Monday is that Venus trine Saturn. So again, as I come back for next week's report for Tuesday, Venus will be making more aspects Tuesday and Wednesday, and then, the moon will be reaching Mars. And there's going to be just a lot more about relationship where something has changed by next week. And if nothing literally has changed, just the mood, the dynamics, the feelings of it all are going to be changing and want something new and different. Again, relationship generally wants a lot more attention now. So it's good. This is a good time in relationship by next week to start giving more gifts, to make people feel special, put them up on a pedestal a little bit. It's more romantic generally, especially once Venus gets past the opposition with Pluto, because there's still a little bit of a shadow involved, a little bit of an undercurrent of power dynamics involved at first. But as Venus builds up momentum through Leo, more and more romance, more and more attention and fun, and wanting to be more happy and joyful within connection with other and doing something very new and different than the past. But yet, there's still this practical component, of looking at the future, making plans in relationship as well, but yet still be open to things that are outside of your control. So anyway, that's how I'm seeing it, folks. I hope that's helpful. I'm going to wrap this up. I'm running a little bit late today, so sorry about that, but I hope this was helpful, and I hope you have a great week ahead. Take good care.